The rain had stopped just an hour before the funeral, but the sky remained gray and heavy like it was holding its breath. Inside St. Peter's Church, the wooden pews were filled with people dressed in black, their faces somber and quiet. At the front, near the casket covered in white lilies, sat a young woman holding a baby girl who couldn't have been more than 6 months old. Her name was Rachel, and she was 28 years old, though today she felt like she had aged a lifetime. The baby in her arms, little Sophie, kept reaching for her mother's face with tiny fingers, not understanding why everything felt so sad. Rachel gently kissed her daughter's hand and pulled her closer, finding comfort in the warmth of her child's small body. The service had been beautiful. The pastor spoke about her husband James and how he was a good man who worked hard every day to provide for his family. James had been a construction worker, strong and kind, always coming home with a smile even when his back ached and his hands were covered in cuts and dust. 3 weeks ago, he had fallen from a scaffold at a job site. The doctors tried everything, but his injuries were too severe. He was only 32 years old. Rachel had cried so much over the past weeks that she thought she had no tears left. But sitting there in the church, listening to people share stories about James, she felt them coming again. She wiped her eyes with a tissue, trying to stay strong for Sophie, who was starting to fuss. As the service came to an end, people began to stand up slowly, preparing to leave. Rachel stayed in her seat for a moment longer, not ready to say goodbye. She looked at the casket one more time, whispering a silent promise to James that she would take care of their daughter no matter what. That's when she heard footsteps approaching from behind, heavy footsteps that seemed angry somehow. She turned and saw James's older brother, Vincent, walking toward her with his wife, Crystal, right beside him. Vincent was a big man with a hard face, and he had never really liked Rachel. He thought she wasn't good enough for his little brother, though he never said it to James's face. Vincent stopped right in front of her pew, his arms crossed over his chest. Crystal stood next to him with a pinched expression, like she had just tasted something bitter. Rachel looked up at them, confused about why they seemed so upset on a day like this. "We need to talk," Vincent said, his voice loud enough that several people nearby turned to look. Rachel stood up carefully, adjusting Sophie on her hip. "Can it wait? I just want to—" "No, it can't wait," Vincent interrupted. "You need to hear this now." Rachel felt her heart begin to pound. Something about the way he was looking at her made her scared. "What is it?" she asked quietly. Vincent glanced around at the people who were watching them. Then he spoke even louder, like he wanted everyone to hear. "You're not welcome in this family anymore. James is gone, and that means you have no connection to us." Rachel felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. "What are you talking about?" "Sophie is James's daughter. She's your niece." Crystal let out a cold laugh. "Oh, please. We all know you only married James because you thought he had money. You were just using him." "That's not true." Rachel's voice cracked. Sophie started crying, sensing her mother's distress. Several people in the church were now openly staring, whispering to each other. "Save it," Vincent said, waving his hand dismissively. "Here's the situation. That house you've been living in? It's in my name. James was renting from me, and I'm done with that arrangement. You have 1 week to get out." Rachel felt dizzy. She knew James had been paying his brother rent, but she always thought they were working toward buying the house eventually. James had always said not to worry about it, that Vincent was giving them a good deal because they were family. "Vincent, please," Rachel begged, her voice shaking. "I just lost my husband. Sophie just lost her father. Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem," Vincent said coldly. "You should have thought about that before you trapped my brother with a baby." The words hit Rachel like daggers. She had loved James with everything she had. They had been high school sweethearts. Sophie wasn't a trap. She was a blessing, a child they both wanted desperately. "You can't do this," Rachel said, tears now streaming down her face. "Not today. Not at his funeral." But Vincent wasn't listening. He nodded to Crystal, who stepped forward and grabbed Rachel's arm roughly. "Come on, you need to leave. Let go of me." Rachel tried to pull away, but Crystal's grip was strong. Sophie was screaming now, frightened by the shouting and the rough handling. "You heard him. Get out," Crystal hissed, pulling Rachel toward the aisle. Rachel looked around desperately for help. There were at least 40 people in the church, many of them James's relatives and friends. But they all just stood there watching. Some looked uncomfortable, some looked away, but nobody moved to help her. They were all too afraid of Vincent, who had a reputation for being mean and vindictive. "Please," Rachel sobbed, struggling to hold on to Sophie while being dragged down the aisle. "Somebody help me, please." But the crowd just parted silently, letting Crystal pull her through. Vincent followed behind them, his face hard and satisfied. Rachel's legs felt weak, like they might give out at any moment. This couldn't be happening. Not today. Not at her husband's funeral. She was being thrown out like garbage while James's body was still in the church. They were almost to the big wooden doors at the back when a voice rang out, clear and strong. "That's quite enough." Everyone froze. Rachel, still being held by Crystal, turned her head to see where the voice had come from. In the very last pew near the back corner of the church stood an older man. He was tall and slim, probably in his early 70s, with silver hair neatly combed back. He wore an expensive-looking dark suit and had a face that commanded respect without seeming mean. Vincent turned around, annoyed at the interruption. "This is a family matter, old man. Mind your business." The older gentleman stepped out from his pew and began walking down the aisle toward them. His movements were calm and measured, but there was something about him that made everyone pay attention. When you're creating a public spectacle by assaulting a young mother in a house of God, it becomes everyone's business. "Assaulting?" Crystal scoffed, finally releasing Rachel's arm. "We're just asking her to leave. By dragging her out by force while she holds an infant?" The man's voice was steady but firm. "That's not asking. That's assault and harassment." He stopped a few feet away from Vincent, looking him directly in the eye. Vincent was a big man, but somehow this older gentleman made him seem small. There was a long moment of tense silence as the two men stared at each other. Finally, Vincent looked away first. "Who are you anyway? I've never seen you before." "I'm someone who came to pay respects to a man I heard was decent and kind," the man said. "I'm also someone who won't stand by and watch his widow be treated this way. Now I suggest you and your wife leave this young lady alone." Vincent's face turned red with anger and embarrassment. People were watching him now, judging him. He pointed a finger at Rachel. "This isn't over. 1 week. That's all you get." He turned and stormed out of the church, Crystal rushing after him. The crowd began to murmur, some people looking ashamed of themselves for not helping. Rachel stood there trembling, trying to calm Sophie, who was still crying. She felt the older man's hand gently touch her shoulder. "Are you all right, young lady?" he asked kindly. Rachel looked up at him, this stranger who had been the only one brave enough to stand up for her, and burst into fresh tears. Rachel couldn't stop shaking. Even though Crystal had let go of her arm, she could still feel the bruising grip where the woman's fingers had dug into her skin. Sophie had finally quieted down, exhausted from all the crying, and was now resting her little head against Rachel's shoulder with small hiccuping breaths. The older gentleman stood there patiently, waiting for her to compose herself. He pulled a clean handkerchief from his jacket pocket and offered it to her. "Here, take this," he said gently. "Thank you," Rachel whispered, taking it and wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry. I don't know what to say. You didn't have to do that." "Actually, I did," the man replied with a small, sad smile. "What I witnessed was wrong, and I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. My name is Robert, by the way. Robert Chen." Rachel looked at him properly for the first time. His eyes were kind, with little wrinkles at the corners that suggested he smiled often. Despite his expensive suit and the confident way he carried himself, there was nothing intimidating about him. He seemed like someone who genuinely cared. "I'm Rachel Torres. And this is Sophie," she said, adjusting the baby on her hip. Sophie had fallen asleep now, her tiny fist clutching Rachel's black dress. The other people in the church were starting to leave, casting curious glances their way but keeping their distance. The pastor approached them looking concerned. "Rachel, is everything okay? Do you need me to call someone?" Rachel shook her head. "No, Father Michael. I'll be fine. Thank you for the beautiful service." Her voice cracked on the last word. The pastor squeezed her hand sympathetically before walking away to greet the remaining guests. Rachel realized she needed to leave too, but the thought of going back to that empty house filled her with dread. "How are you getting home?" Robert asked, as if reading her thoughts. "I took a taxi here this morning," Rachel admitted. "I couldn't drive. I was too upset." "Then please let me drive you," Robert offered. "It's the least I can do. You shouldn't have to worry about finding transportation today of all days." Rachel hesitated. She had been taught never to accept rides from strangers, but Robert had just defended her when no one else would. And honestly, she was too exhausted to argue or figure out another way home. "Okay," she said quietly. "Thank you. That would help a lot." Robert's car turned out to be a dark blue sedan, nice but not flashy. He opened the back door for her so she could settle Sophie into her car seat, which Rachel had brought in her large bag. Once the baby was secure, Rachel climbed into the front passenger seat, suddenly feeling the weight of everything that had happened. As Robert pulled out of the church parking lot, Rachel gave him her address. They drove in silence for a few minutes, the only sound being Sophie's soft breathing from the back seat. Finally, Rachel spoke. "I don't understand why you were at the funeral. Did you know James?" Robert kept his eyes on the road. "No, I didn't know your husband personally. I knew Father Michael, the pastor. We went to school together many years ago. He mentioned the funeral this week when we had lunch, and something about the story stayed with me. A young man, barely 30, leaving behind a wife and baby. It reminded me of my own past." Rachel turned to look at him. "Your past?" Robert nodded slowly. "A long time ago I lost my wife, cancer. She was only 29. We had a 4-year-old son. I was working construction back then, barely making ends meet. When she died, I fell apart. Lost my job, couldn't pay rent, ended up sleeping in my car with my boy." Rachel's breath caught. She couldn't imagine going through something like that. "I'm so sorry. That must have been terrible." "It was the darkest time of my life," Robert continued, his voice distant with memory. "I was ready to give up completely. But then something happened. Someone helped me." He paused at a red light and turned to meet her eyes. "A woman named Linda owned a small property management company. She found me and my son sleeping in my car outside one of her buildings. Instead of calling the police, she offered me a job. She gave me an apartment, helped me get back on my feet. She didn't have to do any of that, but she did." "That was incredibly kind of her," Rachel said softly. "It changed everything," Robert said as the light turned green. "Over the years, I worked hard, learned the business, eventually started my own real estate company. I did well for myself, better than I ever imagined possible. And when Linda passed away 10 years ago, she left me a letter. In it, she asked me to promise that I would help others the way she helped me. She called it passing the light forward." Rachel felt tears welling up again. "And you've kept that promise?" "I try to," Robert said simply. "When Father Michael told me about your situation this week, something pulled at me. Then today, when I saw what was happening at the church, I knew I had to step in." They turned onto Rachel's street and she pointed to a small gray house with white trim. "That's mine." "Well, it's Vincent's technically, but it's been our home for 3 years. Robert pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine. He didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at the house. Rachel felt she should get out, but something kept her sitting there. "Rachel," Robert said carefully, "I don't want to overstep, but I have to ask. What's your situation? Financially, I mean. Do you have family who can help you?" Rachel let out a long breath. There was no point in hiding it. "Not really. My parents died in a car accident when I was 20. I don't have any siblings. James's family, well, you saw how they feel about me. As for money," she laughed bitterly. "James didn't have life insurance. We kept meaning to get it but kept putting it off because we were young and healthy. The hospital bills from his accident came to almost $40,000. Our savings account has $812 in it." Robert listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful. "I used to teach first grade," Rachel continued, "but I quit when Sophie was born. James and I agreed I would stay home with her for the first year. Now I don't have a job. I have medical debt, and in 1 week I'll be homeless with a 6-month-old baby." Saying it all out loud made it feel even more real, more terrifying. Rachel pressed her hand against her mouth, trying not to break down again. Robert reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. He handed it to her. The card was simple and elegant with his name and phone number. "I want you to call me tomorrow," he said. "Not too early, sleep in if you can. But call me when you're ready. I might have a solution that could help you." Rachel looked at the card, then back at him. "What kind of solution?" "Let's talk about it tomorrow when you've had time to rest," Robert said kindly. "Today has been hard enough. Just know that you're not alone in this and there are options. Will you call me?" Rachel nodded, clutching the card. Yes, I'll call you. Thank you, Robert, for everything." She got out and carefully lifted Sophie from her car seat. The baby stirred but didn't wake up. Robert waited in the driveway until she had unlocked the front door and was safely inside before he drove away. Inside the house, Rachel felt the emptiness hit her like a wave. James's work boots were still by the door. His coffee mug was still in the sink from 3 weeks ago, the morning of the accident. She had been unable to wash it, unable to erase that last trace of his normal morning routine. She laid Sophie down in her crib and walked to the kitchen table, where she sat down heavily. Robert's business card was still in her hand. She set it carefully on the table, right next to a stack of medical bills she'd been too scared to open. For the first time in weeks, Rachel felt something other than despair. It wasn't quite hope, not yet, but it was something. A tiny crack in the darkness that had been suffocating her. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Robert's story, about how he had lost everything and somehow found his way back. She thought about Linda, the woman who had helped a stranger without asking for anything in return. Around midnight, she heard a sound at the front door. Her heart jumped. She crept to the window and peeked through the curtain. Someone had slipped something under her door. Rachel waited until she heard footsteps walking away before she opened the door. On the ground was an official-looking envelope. She picked it up with trembling hands and tore it open. It was an eviction notice from Vincent. The language was cold and legal. She had exactly 5 days to vacate the property. If she didn't leave, he would have the sheriff forcibly remove her and all her belongings. Rachel's hand shook as she read it. 5 days, not even a week. He had lied at the funeral, probably just to hurt her more. She walked back to the kitchen table and sat down, the eviction notice in one hand and Robert's business card in the other. Tomorrow morning, she would call him. She had no choice now. Whatever help he was offering, she would have to take it. Rachel looked at the clock. It was 12:47 in the morning. In a few hours, the sun would rise on what might be the most important phone call of her life. She picked up James's wedding ring from the table, the one the hospital had given back to her. She held it tight in her fist and whispered into the quiet house, "I'll take care of us. I promise. Somehow I'll figure this out." Rachel barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Vincent's angry face or heard Crystal's cruel laughter. By the time the sun started peeking through her bedroom curtains, she had already been awake for an hour, just staring at the ceiling and listening to Sophie's peaceful breathing through the baby monitor. At 8:30 in the morning, after feeding Sophie and getting her dressed, Rachel sat at the kitchen table with Robert's business card in front of her. Her phone felt heavy in her hand. What if he had changed his mind? What if yesterday's kindness had worn off and he realized helping her was too much trouble? But she had no choice. 5 days wasn't enough time to figure this out on her own. Rachel took a deep breath and dialed the number. Robert answered on the second ring. "Hello? Mr. Chen? It's Rachel. Rachel Torres. From yesterday." Her voice came out shaky. "Rachel, good morning. Please call me Robert. How are you feeling today?" "Honestly? Terrified," Rachel admitted. "Vincent slipped an eviction notice under my door last night. I only have 5 days, not a week like he said at the funeral." She heard Robert sigh on the other end. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm not surprised. Men like Vincent rarely keep their word. Listen, are you available this morning? I'd like to meet with you, somewhere quiet where we can talk properly. There's a small coffee shop called Rosie's on Maple Street. Do you know it?" "Yes, I know where that is," Rachel said. "What time? Would 10 o'clock work for you? And please bring Sophie. I want you to be comfortable." An hour later, Rachel pushed Sophie's stroller through the door of Rosie's cafe. The place smelled like fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls. Robert was already there, sitting at a corner table away from the other customers. He stood up when he saw her and pulled out a chair. "Thank you for coming," he said warmly. "Can I get you something? Coffee? Tea?" "Just water is fine," Rachel said, settling Sophie's stroller beside the table. The baby was awake and looking around curiously at all the new sights. Robert returned with 2 waters and sat down across from her. He didn't waste time with small talk, which Rachel appreciated. "Rachel, I've been thinking about your situation all night," he began. "I want to help you, but I need to explain something first. I don't believe in just giving people money. That's not really helping, it's just putting a bandage on a broken leg." Rachel nodded, though her heart sank a little. She understood what he meant, but she had been hoping for some quick solution. "What I want to offer you is opportunity," Robert continued. "A chance to stand on your own feet again. I own several properties around the city, and I'm about to start a new project. I'm converting an old apartment building into affordable housing for single mothers who are struggling. Women who need a safe place to get their lives together. Rachel listened carefully, not sure where this was going. The renovation starts in 2 weeks, Robert said. I need someone to manage the project. Someone who can coordinate with contractors, keep track of budgets, make sure everything stays on schedule. Someone organized and smart who cares about helping people. I think you could do this job. Rachel stared at him. But I've never done anything like that. I was a teacher. I don't know anything about construction or project management. You managed a classroom of 25 first graders, Robert said with a slight smile. Trust me, that requires incredible organizational skills, patience, and problem-solving ability. Those are exactly the skills you'll need. I'll teach you the rest. Rachel felt her pulse quicken. Are you serious? You're offering me a job? Yes, a real job with a real salary, enough to support yourself and Sophie. And here's the other part. I have a small apartment on one of my properties. It's empty right now, fully furnished. You and Sophie can live there rent-free for 6 months while you get back on your feet and save money. After that, we can discuss a fair rent based on what you can afford. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. She couldn't speak for a moment. It was too much, too good to be true. Why? She finally managed to ask. Why would you do all this for me? You don't even know me. Robert leaned back in his chair. I told you yesterday about Linda, the woman who helped me. Before she died, she told me something I've never forgotten. She said that kindness isn't about knowing someone. It's about seeing someone who needs help and having the ability to give it. She said we're all just one bad day away from needing a stranger's kindness. He looked at Sophie, who was playing with her tiny toes. You lost your husband. You have a baby to care for. You're facing homelessness through no fault of your own. Yesterday at that funeral, I saw a young woman who needed help, and I have the means to help. It's that simple. But what if I fail? Rachel asked, fear creeping into her voice. What if I mess up the project or can't handle it? Then we'll figure it out together, Robert said calmly. Rachel, I'm not expecting you to be perfect. I'm expecting you to try. That's all anyone can do. And honestly, I have a good feeling about you. You've been through something terrible. And you're still here, still fighting for your daughter. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Rachel wiped her eyes with a napkin. What about my debt? The hospital bills? I'll take care of those, Robert said. Consider it an advance on your salary. You can pay me back slowly over time, no interest. Or if the project goes well and you prove yourself, we might call it even. But let's not worry about that right now. First things first, we need to get you out of that house before Vincent causes more problems. Rachel felt like she was in a dream. Yesterday she had been at rock bottom, seeing no way forward. Now this man was offering her a complete lifeline. It seemed impossible. I don't know what to say, Rachel whispered. Thank you doesn't feel like enough. Then just say yes, Robert replied with a warm smile. Say yes and let's get started changing your life. Yes, Rachel said, her voice stronger now. Yes, I'll do it. Robert reached across the table and shook her hand. Welcome aboard. Now let's talk logistics. I can have a moving truck at your house tomorrow morning. We'll get your belongings out before Vincent can cause any more trouble. The apartment is ready today if you want to see it. They spent the next hour discussing details. Robert explained that the apartment had 2 bedrooms, so Sophie could have her own room. It came with basic furniture and dishes. The building had a small playground where Sophie could play when she got older. There was even a daycare center 2 blocks away that Robert knew the owner of. As they talked, Rachel felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Real, tangible hope that maybe things would be okay. That maybe she and Sophie would not just survive, but actually build a good life. When they finally left the cafe, Rachel pushed Sophie's stroller back toward her car with Robert walking beside her. The morning sun felt warmer now, the sky a brighter blue. One more thing, Robert said as they reached her car. I want you to understand something. This isn't charity. I genuinely need someone for this project, and I believe you're the right person. You're going to earn every penny I pay you. I expect hard work and dedication. Can you give me that? Rachel looked him straight in the eye. I will. You won't regret this, Robert. I promise you. I know I won't, he said confidently. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 9. I'll bring the moving truck and some helpers. We'll have you out of there and into your new place by afternoon. As Rachel drove home, she kept glancing at Sophie in the rearview mirror. The baby had fallen asleep, her little face peaceful and innocent. For the first time since James died, Rachel felt like she could actually protect her daughter. She could give Sophie a stable home, a future. When she pulled into her driveway, she noticed Vincent's truck parked across the street. He was sitting in the driver's seat watching her house. Their eyes met for a brief moment before Rachel looked away and hurried inside with Sophie. But this time she wasn't afraid. Vincent thought he had won by forcing her out. He had no idea that his cruelty had actually led her to something better. Tomorrow she would pack up and leave this house behind, and Vincent would never have the satisfaction of seeing her broken. Rachel looked around the small living room, at all the memories she and James had made here. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty room, to James's spirit, to whatever force in the universe had brought Robert into her life. "Thank you for not giving up on us." The next morning arrived faster than Rachel expected. She had spent most of the night packing boxes, wrapping dishes in newspaper, and sorting through 3 years of memories. Sophie slept peacefully through it all, unaware that their lives were about to change completely. At exactly 9 o'clock, Rachel heard the rumble of a truck pulling up outside. She peeked through the curtain and saw Robert climbing out of a large moving van, followed by 2 younger men who looked ready to work. She took a deep breath, picked up Sophie, and opened the front door. "Good morning," Robert called out with a friendly wave. "Rachel, these are my nephews, Danny and Luis. They're going to help us load everything up. Boys, this is Rachel and little Sophie." Both young men smiled warmly and got straight to work. Rachel was amazed at how efficiently they moved, carrying boxes and furniture like they'd been doing this their whole lives. Robert stayed close to Rachel, making sure she was comfortable and asking which items were most important to her. About an hour into the move, Rachel heard a car door slam. Her stomach dropped. She looked out the window and saw Vincent marching toward the house, his face red and angry. Crystal was right behind him, her phone already out like she was ready to record something. Vincent stormed up to the front door without knocking. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Robert stepped forward calmly, placing himself between Vincent and Rachel. "We're moving her belongings out, as you requested. I believe you gave her 5 days and she's leaving early. I don't see the problem." Vincent's eyes narrowed when he recognized Robert from the funeral. "You again? Who are you, her sugar daddy?" "I'm her employer," Robert said evenly, "and a friend who doesn't appreciate seeing people bullied. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do." "Wait just a minute," Vincent said, his voice getting louder. "I need to inspect this property. Make sure she hasn't damaged anything. She's not leaving until I check every room." Rachel felt her hands start to shake, but Robert remained completely calm. "That's fine. You can do your inspection after we finish loading. But I'll be here as a witness to make sure this inspection is legitimate and not harassment." Vincent clearly hadn't expected that response. He opened his mouth to argue, but Crystal grabbed his arm and whispered something in his ear. They both looked at Robert, then at the 2 strong young men carrying furniture, and seemed to reconsider their approach. "Fine," Vincent spat, "but don't think this is over. I know people in this town. I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person she really is." Robert took a step closer to Vincent, his voice dropping to a quiet but firm tone. "Let me be very clear about something. If you spread lies about Rachel, if you attempt to damage her reputation or interfere with her employment, you'll be hearing from my lawyers. Defamation is a serious legal matter. Do you understand?" Vincent's face went pale. The mention of lawyers clearly rattled him. He mumbled something under his breath and walked back to his truck with Crystal following. But they didn't leave. They just sat there watching. Rachel let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Thank you," she said quietly to Robert. "Don't worry about him," Robert said with a reassuring smile. "Bullies like Vincent only have power when people are afraid of them. The moment you stand up to them, they crumble. Now let's get you moved into your new home." 2 hours later, the truck was fully loaded. Rachel did one final walk through the house, her footsteps echoing in the empty rooms. This place had been full of love once. She and James had painted these walls together, hung pictures, made plans for the future. Now it was just an empty shell. She placed the house keys on the kitchen counter, took one last look around, and walked out the front door. Vincent immediately jumped out of his truck and rushed past her to start his inspection. Rachel didn't even look back. The drive to her new apartment took only 15 minutes. Robert led the way in his car while Rachel followed with Sophie in her back seat. They pulled up to a 3-story brick building with a well-maintained lawn and colorful flowers planted along the walkway. It looked safe and welcoming. "This is it," Robert said, unlocking the main entrance. "Your apartment is on the 2nd floor. Unit 2B. When Robert opened the apartment door, Rachel's breath caught. It was beautiful. Hardwood floors gleamed in the sunlight streaming through large windows. The living room had a comfortable couch and a coffee table. The kitchen was small but modern and clean. Everything was simple but nice, and it was all hers. "The master bedroom is through here," Robert said, leading her down a short hallway. "And this smaller room next door is perfect for Sophie." Rachel walked into Sophie's future room, and her eyes immediately filled with tears. Someone had already set up a white crib with a mobile hanging above it. There was a changing table, a rocking chair, and even some stuffed animals arranged on a small bookshelf. "My wife and I kept these from when our son was a baby," Robert explained softly. "We've been saving them for our grandchildren. But my son and his wife aren't ready for kids yet. I thought Sophie could use them in the meantime." Rachel couldn't hold back her tears anymore. "I don't understand how you can be so kind to someone you barely know." Robert smiled gently. "When my wife Linda helped me all those years ago, I asked her the same thing. Do you know what she said? She told me that kindness doesn't need a reason. It's not a transaction or a favor that needs to be repaid. It's just what we do when we have the ability to make someone's life a little easier." Over the next few hours, Danny and Luis helped unload all of Rachel's belongings. They were careful with everything, placing boxes in the right rooms and assembling furniture where needed. By late afternoon, the apartment was starting to feel like a real home. When the boys finished, Robert handed them each some cash and thanked them for their help. They said goodbye to Rachel, both telling her that if she needed anything, she should just call their uncle. After they left, Robert sat down at Rachel's new kitchen table. "Now let's talk about the job. Starting Monday, you'll come to my office and I'll begin training you on the renovation project. The building we're converting is about 10 minutes from here. We have architects, contractors, and suppliers to coordinate with. It's going to be challenging, but I know you can handle it." Rachel nodded, feeling both nervous and excited. "What about Sophie?" "I need to find childcare. I mentioned the daycare down the street, remember? I called the owner yesterday. Her name is Patricia. She has an opening and she's expecting you to stop by this weekend. Tell her I sent you." Robert stood up to leave but paused at the door. "Rachel, I want you to know something. This past week you've lost your husband, been threatened by his family, and faced the possibility of homelessness. A lot of people would have given up. But you didn't. You kept fighting for your daughter. That strength is exactly what you'll need for this new chapter." "I don't feel very strong," Rachel admitted. "That's because you don't recognize it yet," Robert said. "But trust me, it's there. Get some rest this weekend. On Monday, we start building your future." After Robert left, Rachel stood in the middle of her new living room holding Sophie. The evening sun cast a warm glow through the windows. For the first time in weeks, the apartment was quiet but not lonely. It felt peaceful. She walked to Sophie's new room and gently laid the baby down in the crib. Sophie looked up at her mother with big, trusting eyes, not knowing how close they had come to losing everything. "We're going to be okay," Rachel whispered, stroking her daughter's soft hair. "I promise you, baby girl. We're going to build a good life here, a life your daddy would be proud of." That night, Rachel slept better than she had in weeks. She dreamed of James, and in the dream, he was smiling. He didn't say anything, but somehow she understood what he was trying to tell her. He was proud of her. He was at peace. And most importantly, he wanted her to keep living, to keep fighting, to give Sophie the beautiful life they had always planned together. When Rachel woke up Sunday morning, sunlight was pouring through her bedroom window. She could hear Sophie cooing happily in her crib. She got up, made herself coffee in her new kitchen, and looked around at the fresh start she'd been given. On Monday, she would begin her new job. She would learn new skills, face new challenges, and prove to herself that she was stronger than she ever imagined. But today, on this quiet Sunday morning, Rachel simply held her daughter close and whispered a thank you to the universe, to James, and to the kind stranger named Robert who had seen her at her lowest moment and offered her a hand up instead of looking away. 6 months passed faster than Rachel could have imagined. Every morning she woke up in her comfortable apartment, got Sophie ready for daycare, and headed to work feeling like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The scared, desperate woman from the funeral felt like a different person entirely. The renovation project had been challenging, just like Robert warned. There were days when contractors didn't show up, when supplies arrived late, when budgets didn't match up. But Rachel discovered something about herself during those difficult moments. She was good at this. Really good. She had a natural ability to solve problems, keep people organized, and make things happen. Robert had been right about her teaching skills translating to project management. Managing contractors was not so different from managing a classroom full of energetic 6-year-olds. Both required patience, clear communication, and the ability to stay calm when things got chaotic. Today was special, though. Today was the grand opening of the affordable housing project. The old run-down apartment building had been transformed into a beautiful community space with 12 units for single mothers who needed a safe place to rebuild their lives. Rachel had been part of every decision, from choosing paint colors to interviewing potential residents. She stood in the community room, watching people arrive for the ceremony. Local news reporters were there. City council members, families who would be moving into the building, and Robert, of course, standing off to the side in his usual quiet way, letting Rachel handle the spotlight. Patricia from the daycare center came up to Rachel with Sophie on her hip. "Look who wanted to see her mama," Patricia said with a warm smile. Sophie reached out her little arms and Rachel took her daughter, holding her close. "Are you nervous about the speech?" Patricia asked. "Terrified," Rachel admitted with a small laugh. "I've never spoken in front of this many people before." "You'll do great," Patricia assured her. "Just speak from your heart." A few minutes later, Robert stepped up to the microphone. The room quieted down. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to celebrate the completion of Hope Gardens Apartments. This project has been a dream of mine for many years, and I'm proud to see it finally come to life." He paused and smiled. "But I can't take credit for its success. That belongs to someone else. 6 months ago, I met a young woman at her husband's funeral. She had just lost everything and was facing an impossible situation. But instead of giving up, she took a chance on herself. Today, I'm proud to introduce Rachel Torres, the project manager who made Hope Gardens a reality." The room erupted in applause. Rachel's heart was pounding as she walked to the front, still holding Sophie. She stood at the microphone and looked out at all the faces staring back at her. For a moment, her mind went blank. Then she looked down at her daughter and remembered why she was here. 6 months ago, I was sitting in a church at my husband's funeral," Rachel began, her voice shaky at first but growing stronger. "I was being told to leave, that I wasn't wanted, that I had no future. I was holding my baby daughter and wondering how I was going to survive the next week, let alone the rest of our lives." She glanced at Robert, who was watching her with pride in his eyes. "Then a stranger stood up for me. He didn't know me. He didn't owe me anything, but he saw someone who needed help and he chose to act. That decision changed everything. But Robert didn't just give me money or a place to live. He gave me something much more valuable. He gave me a chance to prove to myself that I was stronger than I thought. He gave me work that mattered. He gave me purpose when I felt purposeless." Rachel looked around the beautiful community room. This building represents more than just affordable housing. It represents hope. It represents second chances. Every woman who moves into these apartments will have the opportunity I was given. A safe home, time to heal, space to rebuild, and most importantly, someone who believes in them. Her voice cracked with emotion. "My husband James never got to see this building completed. He never got to see Sophie take her first steps or say her first word. But I know he would be so proud of what we've created here. This project is dedicated to his memory and to every person who has ever felt lost and alone." Rachel paused, collecting herself. "Robert told me once that his mentor, a woman named Linda, believed in passing kindness forward. She helped him when he was at his lowest, and he promised to do the same for others. Today I make that same promise. I will spend my life helping people the way I was helped, because that's what we do. We lift each other up." The room was completely silent except for the sound of people sniffling and wiping their eyes. Rachel looked directly at the families who would be moving in. "To the mothers who will call this place home, I want you to know something. Your past doesn't define your future. Your current struggle doesn't determine your worth. You are strong, you are capable, and you deserve every good thing that's coming your way." Sophie made a happy sound and the crowd laughed warmly. Rachel kissed her daughter's head. "And to my sweet Sophie, Even though you won't remember this day, I want you to know that your mama fought hard to give you a better life. Never forget that you come from love and that love will always guide us forward." The applause was thunderous. People stood up, some crying openly. Rachel stepped back from the microphone, overwhelmed by the emotion in the room. Robert came forward and gave her a warm hug. "You did it," he said quietly. "Linda would have been so proud of you." After the ceremony, people came up to Rachel one by one. Some thanked her for her work on the project. Others shared their own stories of struggle and survival. One woman, a future resident named Diane, hugged Rachel tightly. "You give me hope that things can get better," she whispered. As the crowd began to thin out, Rachel noticed someone standing near the back door. Her breath caught. It was Vincent. He looked different somehow, smaller, less intimidating. He caught her eye and surprisingly nodded respectfully before turning to leave. Rachel didn't chase after him or say anything. She simply watched him go, feeling nothing but indifference. He no longer had any power over her. She had moved on to something bigger and better. Later that evening, after everyone had left and the building was quiet, Robert and Rachel stood in the main lobby admiring their work. "So, what's next?" Robert asked with a knowing smile. "What do you mean?" Rachel asked. "This can't be the only Hope Gardens. There are thousands of women like you were, all over this city, all over the country. What if we built more? What if this became something bigger?" Rachel felt her heart skip. She looked at Robert, then at Sophie sleeping peacefully in her arms, then back at the beautiful building they had created together. A year ago, she couldn't have imagined any of this. Now she couldn't imagine doing anything else. "Yes," she said with certainty. "Let's build more. Let's help as many people as we can." Robert extended his hand and Rachel shook it firmly. "Partners?" he asked. "Partners," Rachel agreed. That night, Rachel stood on her apartment balcony looking up at the stars. Sophie was asleep in her crib, safe and loved. Tomorrow, Rachel would go back to work planning the next Hope Gardens project. She would continue learning and growing. She would keep her promise to help others. She thought about James and smiled. He would be so proud of the woman she had become. The woman she had to become. Loss had broken her heart, but it hadn't broken her spirit. Instead, it had revealed a strength she never knew existed. "Thank you," Rachel whispered to the night sky. "Thank you to James for the love that sustained her. Thank you to Robert for seeing her potential when she couldn't see it herself. Thank you to Linda, the woman she never met but whose legacy of kindness had changed her life. And thank you to herself for refusing to give up even when giving up would have been so much easier." 3 years later, Hope Gardens had expanded to 5 locations across the state. Rachel had been promoted to Director of Operations, overseeing all the projects and mentoring other women who wanted to make a difference. She had even started dating again, a kind architect named Michael who worked on their buildings and loved Sophie like she was his own. Sophie was now 4 years old, bright and curious, always asking questions about everything. Rachel often took her daughter to visit the Hope Garden sites, teaching her early that helping others wasn't just something you talked about. It was something you lived. One evening, Sophie asked her mother a question. "Mama, why do we help people we don't know?" Rachel knelt down to her daughter's level and smiled. "Because once upon a time, a kind man helped Mama when she really needed it. He didn't have to, but he did. And that changed everything for us. Now it's our turn to help others. That's how kindness works, sweetheart. We pass it forward, one person at a time." Sophie thought about this for a moment, then hugged her mother tight. "I want to help people too when I grow up." "I know you will, baby," Rachel said, holding her daughter close. "I know you will." And as the sun set on another beautiful day, Rachel realized something profound. That terrible day at James's funeral, when she was being dragged out of the church when everything seemed hopeless and dark, that had been the beginning of something extraordinary. Sometimes our worst moments lead us to our greatest purpose. Sometimes rock bottom is the solid foundation on which we build our best life. And sometimes, just sometimes, a stranger's kindness is exactly what we need to discover who we were always meant to be.